My daughter. She walked toward the check-in counter with two friends, the three of them chatting and laughing like they hadn't a care in the world, sunglasses pushed up into their hair like little crowns, matching pastel carry-on bags, perfectly painted nails catching the light. Her smile was wide, effortless. It was the kind of smile I'd seen before, when she'd gotten into her college of choice, when she bought her first car, but this one wasn't earned, because the money behind that smile wasn't hers. It was mine. Not money I had given her, not money I had agreed to spend, no, money she had taken. I shifted slightly, my shoulder brushing the pillar. I kept my distance, just far enough that she wouldn't notice me in the bustling crowd. Watching her from the shadows gave me a strange sense of control. She thought she was free, untouchable. But I knew something she didn't. A week ago, I opened my banking app like I did every Saturday morning. I was ready to pay a few bills, maybe check on the small retirement fund I'd been slowly building. But then, my breath caught. $12,000, gone. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a double charge, maybe fraud. My hands shook as I called the bank. And then, the truth. The trip was booked in her name, paid directly from my account. Airline, hotel, excursions, all luxury, all prepaid. I had given her my login information once, years ago, for an emergency. Apparently, emergency now meant girls' vacation, and here she was, laughing, gliding forward in a pair of new sandals that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. The three of them reached the counter. A young airline employee smiled, scanning her passport and boarding passes. I knew the exact moment it happened. The moment reality cracked her bubble. The employee's hands paused over the keyboard. Their eyes flickered to a colleague. A silent exchange. The second employee leaned in, whispering something. My daughter's smile faltered. "Is there a problem?" she asked. The first employee hesitated, then began typing again. A pause. Another whisper. "I'm sorry, ma'am," they said finally, voice low and careful. "These tickets are no longer valid." She blinked. "What? No, no. That can't be right. I have the confirmation right here." Her voice was growing sharper, each word louder than the last. "I understand," the employee replied evenly, "but this booking was cancelled, and the refund was issued to the account holder." Her face changed. Confusion, frustration, a quick flash of disbelief. Her friends exchanged glances, their easy vacation energy dissolving into awkward silence. And then, like clockwork, her eyes scanned the crowd, searching. She didn't know it yet, but she was looking for me. I stayed still, letting the chaos unfold without my interference. I wanted her to feel every beat of that moment, the heat in her cheeks, the weight of her friends' stares, the way the whole world seemed to pause just for her humiliation. She spoke again, faster now. "That doesn't make sense. I paid for—" She stopped herself mid-sentence. No, she hadn't paid for anything. She knew it. I knew it. Her friends were whispering to each other, their eyes darting between her and the airline desk. One of them muttered something I couldn't hear, but I saw the look, that subtle judgment, the kind that sticks. And me, I just watched, calm, cold, because this wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't about shouting or scenes or punishment for the sake of punishment. It was about balance, about respect, about teaching her a lesson she'd remember longer than the tan she'd planned to get on a stolen trip. That 12,000 wasn't just a number. It was months of labor. It was hours under the hood of strangers' cars, grease under my nails, sweat on my back. It was years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to her. And she had treated me like an ATM. But ATMs, they can refuse withdrawals. I saw the airline employee gesture toward the side, asking her to step away from the counter to make room for the next passengers. Her friends followed reluctantly, their conversation hushed. Tense, she glanced toward the seating area, scanning faces. Our eyes met for the first time. She froze, her lips parted, and in that split second, I knew she understood exactly what had happened. She walked toward me, her steps quick and sharp. Her friends hung back, pretending to check their phones. "Dad, what?" I raised a hand, but tried to just punish Ian, just enough to stop her mid-sentence. My voice was steady, almost too steady. "I didn't take your vacation," I said quietly. I took back my respect. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than the suitcase by her side. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. The announcement for another flight departure echoed overhead, filling the silence between us. I stepped past her without another word, my footsteps blending with the hum of the terminal. What would you do if your own child took from you like that? Would you forgive them, or would you let them face the consequences? If you've ever been used by someone you love, if you've ever felt that sting of being taken for granted, stay with me, because this isn't just about a trip that never happened. It's about the day I stopped being her safety net and became her wake-up call. Before we begin, subscribe, like, and comment. Has anyone ever used you without permission? Tell me your story, because now you're going to hear mine. When I tell you I built my life around her, I mean it, not in the way parents say it casually, not in the way it's written on greeting cards. I mean I rebuilt myself from the ground up after her mother died, and I built every single brick of my future around making sure my daughter stood taller than I ever could. 22 years ago, my life broke. One icy morning in January, my wife kissed me on the cheek before heading to work. The roads were slick, but she insisted she'd be fine. I remember watching her taillights fade into the distance through our kitchen window. That was the last time I saw her alive. The phone call came less than an hour later. A truck had skidded on black ice. There was nothing the paramedics could do. That day, the world went quiet. My house, once full of warmth and noise, felt like a hollow shell. My daughter was only 6, too young to understand the permanence of death, but old enough to feel the emptiness in the air. I remember kneeling in front of her, in the living room, her small hands curled into fists. Her voice trembled when she asked, "Where's Mom?" I didn't have the words. All I could do was pull her into my arms and whisper, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." That became my promise, my mission, and for the next 2 decades, I kept it. I was a mechanic back then, working full-time at a small auto shop. It paid enough to scrape by, but not enough to cover the kind of life I wanted for her. So I took on every extra shift I could get. I worked weekends. I stayed late. I fixed engines in neighbors' driveways for a little extra cash. It meant there were nights I came home so exhausted I could barely stand, but I'd still tiptoe into her room to make sure her blanket was pulled up to her chin. I'd still pack her lunch before collapsing into bed. Dinner for me was often a reheated cup of black coffee or a peanut butter sandwich eaten over the sink. She never knew. I made sure she never knew. When school trips came up, I found the money. When she wanted piano lessons, I found the money. When she grew faster than her clothes could keep up, I found the money. Not because I had it lying around, but because I was willing to give up anything, so she wouldn't have to. I sold my wife's jewelry once. It was a week before my daughter's first year of college. The deposit was due, and even with every hour of overtime I could grab, I was short. One night, I sat alone in the living room, with a small velvet box in my hand. Inside was my wife's engagement ring, her gold wedding band, and a delicate silver necklace she wore every Sunday. My hands shook as I closed the box. The next day, I walked into a pawn shop. The man behind the counter offered me less than they were worth, but enough to cover the deposit. I didn't argue. I took the cash, and that night, I wired the payment to the university. I never told my daughter where the money came from. She thought I'd just found a way. I did, but the way was through letting go of the last physical pieces of her mother. There were promotions I turned down too. One year, my boss offered me a management position at a larger shop in another state. More money, better hours, but it meant relocating, pulling her away from her school, her friends, the life she knew. I said no. I stayed in a cramped rented house and kept fixing cars under flickering fluorescent lights, because stability mattered more than a bigger paycheck. I figured there'd be time for me later. There's a philosophy I've carried all my life. I wasn't rich in money, but I was rich in love for her. It guided every decision I made. When bills piled up, when the fridge was half empty, when I lay awake wondering if I could stretch one paycheck to the next, I reminded myself that my job wasn't just to provide, but to protect. Being a mechanic taught me more than just how to repair cars. It taught me patience, precision, and it taught me that even the most broken things can run again if you're willing to put in the work. Engines are simple in a way people aren't. You find the problem, replace what's worn out, tighten what's loose, and you keep going. I thought I could hold my family together the same way. Every time life threw a problem at us, from her bad grades in middle school to the heartbreak after her first boyfriend, I was there to tighten the bolts, replace the parts, and keep her moving forward. And for years it worked. She grew into a confident young woman. She graduated high school with honors. She got into college. I was proud. So proud I could barely stand it. But somewhere along the way, I missed a warning sign. Maybe it was the way she'd drop hints about wanting more expensive things, or the way she'd assume I could cover extra costs without asking. Maybe it was the subtle shift in her tone, from gratitude to expectation. I told myself it was normal, that she was young, that she'd grow out of it. I didn't want to believe that the girl I had sacrificed everything for might one day forget the weight of those sacrifices. Looking back now, I can see the irony. I'd spent my life fixing broken engines, but I didn't see the cracks forming in my own family until it was too late. I'd spent years keeping her life smooth and trouble-free, and in doing so, I'd hidden from her the truth, that everything came at a cost, that nothing, is truly free. I thought I was protecting her. Maybe I was just shielding her from reality. When I stood in that airport and watched her try to board a $12,000 vacation on my dime, without asking, without even telling me, it all came rushing back. The nights I went hungry, the jewelry I pawned, the promotions I refused, all for a daughter who now treated my life's work like a bottomless wallet. But I need you to understand something. This isn't the story of a bitter father. This isn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It's about a promise, one I made to her the day her mother died. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And sometimes, being there means letting them fall. I held my family together like I held an old engine together, with grease-stained hands, aching muscles, and stubborn determination. But even the best mechanic knows, if someone keeps breaking the same part, you stop fixing it for them. You let them feel the cost of the damage. And that's exactly what I was about to do. It started like any other Saturday morning. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to crave when she was a little girl running through the halls. I stood in the kitchen, letting the smell of freshly brewed coffee fill the air. Steam curled from the mug in my hand, drifting toward the cracked window above the sink. I leaned on the counter, sipping slowly, scrolling through my phone. Bills, a reminder for the electric payment, a sale at the hardware store, then my banking app. I don't check it every day, only when I'm paying something big or moving money around, but I like to keep an eye on it, make sure I'm on track. The numbers have always been tight but steady, at least they used to be. When the screen loaded, my eyes went straight to the balance, and my stomach dropped. $12,000, gone. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. I rubbed them, checked again, still gone. For a moment, my mind went blank. Then the panic hit. Hot, sharp, and fast. Had I been hacked? Was this fraud? I scrolled to the transaction history, my thumb moving too quickly, almost shaking. There it was, a single, massive payment, the name of a travel company I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding in my ears. Flights, hotel, all inclusive, the works. I set the mug down too hard. Coffee sloshed over the rim and ran down the counter, but I barely noticed. My hands were already dialing the bank. The hold music felt like a slow drip of water on my skull. Every passing second was another second, where that money, my money, was somewhere else. Finally, a voice. I gave my details, my security questions,
rattling them off like bullets. I explained the charge, told them I hadn't authorized it. There was a pause on the other end, keys clicking, the sound of someone reading. Then, "Sir, this payment was made using your online banking credentials." "No," I said firmly. "I didn't. It was booked under a Miss Daughter's full name." The words hit harder than I expected, like a slow punch to the chest. "My daughter." The bank rep continued explaining the details, but I barely heard them. My mind was already racing backwards. Emergency login information. That's how. I'd given it to her years ago when she was in college, after she lost her wallet during finals week. I'd told her she could use it only if she needed to transfer money for rent or groceries, only in an emergency. Not for this, never for this, never for this. I hung up without even saying goodbye. My coffee had gone cold. The kitchen felt smaller, like the walls had moved in on me. My hands were still trembling when I sat down at the table. A memory surfaced, her at 16, counting out babysitting money into an envelope for a school trip. I'd matched it dollar for dollar, telling her, "If you save for what matters, I'll always help you get the rest." Back then, she'd smiled like she understood. Back then she'd said, "I know, Dad, you can trust me." Trust, the one currency I valued more than the one she had just stolen. I stared at the payment details again. The departure date was in a week. Destination, tropical, 4-star hotel, 2 guests. I imagined her on a beach, drinking cocktails under the sun, while I was here counting the cost in more than just dollars. The money itself mattered. Of course it did. I'd worked for it, but it was what the money represented that cut deepest. Sacrifice, time, a lifetime of saying not now to myself so I could say yes to her, and she had taken it without asking. I called her. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and casual. "Hey Dad, what's up?" I didn't ease into it. "Did you use my account to book a trip?" A pause. Yeah, I was gonna tell you." "Gonna tell me when?" "When you were boarding the plane." My voice was low, steady, but my hands were curling into fists in my lap. She sighed, the kind of sigh that's meant to make you feel unreasonable. "Dad, relax. It's just money. I deserve a break. I've been stressed." Just money. The phrase hit me like a slap. $12,000. The equivalent of months of labor. The equivalent of the last safety net I had. Reduced to just money. "You had no right," I said slowly. "I'm your daughter," she replied, as if that excused it. "Family helps each other." I could feel my jaw tighten. "Family asks." There was a silence on the other end. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd realize what she'd done. Instead, she laughed lightly. "You're overreacting. Look, I'll make it up to you. I'll bring you back something nice." The words were so dismissive, I almost couldn't believe I was hearing them. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I let the silence hang there until she said, "Okay, I gotta go. Love you," and hung up. I sat in my chair for a long time after that. My anger was sharp, yes, but under it was something colder, something heavier. Disbelief, heartbreak. It wasn't just that she'd taken the money, it was that she felt entitled to it. That somewhere along the way, I had raised someone who could look at $12,000 of her father's hard-earned savings and think, "I'll take that, he'll understand." I went back to the kitchen counter, staring at the coffee stain still spread across the surface. I wiped it slowly, my mind already shifting gears. She had taken without asking. She had dismissed my feelings. She had assumed there would be no consequences. And maybe she was right. Maybe I had always let things slide before. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her feel the weight of her choice. I was going to take something back, not just my money, my respect. I didn't tell her I knew every detail of the trip. I didn't tell her that I'd already decided exactly how this was going to end. When I hung up the phone, the first seed of the plan had already taken root, and once it started growing, there was no stopping it. When I ended that phone call with her, I didn't pace the floor. I didn't shout into the walls. I sat still, and I thought, revenge isn't about speed. It's about precision. If you react too quickly, you waste the opportunity. If you wait just long enough, you make it count. I pulled my chair closer to the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for my next move. First I searched my email inbox, and there it was, a forwarded confirmation email from the bank, listing the transaction to the travel company. No itinerary attached, but enough to start pulling at the thread. I went to the travel company's website, entered the booking reference from the bank's notes, and in seconds, the whole thing opened up in front of me. 2 first-class tickets, 5 nights in a 4-star beachfront resort, luxury spa package, private island day trip, dinner reservations at a restaurant where a single plate cost more than I spend in a week on groceries. The total $12,074.56, paid in full. The names listed under primary guest and companion were my daughter and her best friend. I stared at the screen, feeling something shift in my chest. Not rage, not even shock anymore. Resolve. I printed the itinerary, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a folder I keep for important documents. Then I picked up my keys. The travel agency's address was on the booking confirmation. The bell above the glass door jingled when I stepped inside. The place smelled faintly of perfume and paper, that mix of air freshener and printed brochures. A young woman in a navy blazer greeted me from behind the desk. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" I smiled, polite but reserved. "I'm here about a booking. I need to update the payment method." Her fingers tapped on the keyboard as I slid the printed itinerary across the counter. She read through it, nodding. "Yes, we have this here. Could I see your ID, please?" I handed it over without hesitation. When she compared the name on my ID to the account details, her smile brightened. "Perfect. You're the account holder." Yes, I was, and that meant the power was mine. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough to sound casual. "Here's the thing. I need to make some changes. Plans have shifted, and I won't be sending these guests on this trip after all." She blinked, glancing at the screen. "Of course we can assist with that. Are you looking for a refund, or to reschedule?" I pretended to think about it. "Let's reschedule. Same hotel, same package, but in my name, for dates later in the year." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded and began typing. "We'll just need to verify your identity once more for the refund processing to your account. Then we can rebook everything for you." As she worked, I noticed the small sound of the printer behind her. Each page that came out felt like a piece of the trap being built. When the documents were ready, she slid them across the counter for me to sign. My pen didn't hesitate. Within 30 minutes, the trip was no longer hers. The tickets, the hotel suite, the excursions, every single one was now booked under my name, locked behind my ID. Her vacation was gone, and she wouldn't know until she tried to board the plane. I walked out of the travel agency with a thin stack of papers in a crisp folder. Each confirmation page was stamped with my name in bold letters. It felt like holding a shield and a sword at the same time. At home, I laid the documents on my desk and photographed every page. I forwarded them to my personal email and backed them up on an external drive. Every receipt, every email confirmation, every change request. This wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about having proof. Proof that what I'd done was legal. Proof that I had every right. That night, I pulled down a small shoebox from the top of my closet. Inside were bits and pieces from trips we'd taken together years ago. Boarding passes from her first flight, ticket stubs from the amusement park we visited this summer. She turned 10. A faded postcard from the road trip we took after her high school graduation. I held them in my hands, feeling the texture of the paper, the faint smell of old cardboard, and then I let out a slow breath. One by one, I dropped them into the fireplace. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges inward, erasing the faded ink. I watched the old souvenirs turn to ash, the heat licking at my face. It wasn't anger that made me do it. It was clarity. Those souvenirs belonged to a time when I believed she valued the sacrifices I'd made, when I thought she understood that every trip, every gift, every opportunity came from somewhere, from work, from patience, from love. That illusion was gone. If she wanted a gift, I murmured to myself, she should have asked. She stole instead. The fire hissed softly. Like it agreed, I cleaned the ashes out of the fireplace, washed my hands, and returned the folder with the rebooked trip to the desk. The plan was set, simple, undeniable. In a week, she'd arrive at the airport expecting to walk onto a plane for the vacation she thought she'd taken from me. Instead, she'd meet the hard truth at the check-in counter, and I would be there, not to gloat, but to witness the exact moment she realized that respect is earned, not taken. When I went to bed that night, the document sat neatly stacked beside my alarm clock. The hotel confirmation, the flight details, the spa vouchers, all in my name. The house was quiet, and for the first time since I'd seen my bank account drained, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not satisfaction, just the stillness that comes from knowing you've taken back control. When you've made the decision to take something back, you can't hesitate. Hesitation leaves room for second thoughts, and second thoughts kill good plans. So the morning after I left the travel agency, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began the second phase. First on my list, the airline. I found the booking reference number in the new confirmation papers, and called the customer service line. After a few minutes of hold music, a polite man answered. "Good morning. Thank you for calling. How can I help you today?" "Yes," I said, calm and precise. "I'm calling to confirm the reissue of 2 first-class tickets under my name, and to remove the other passenger from the manifest." There was a pause, as he typed. "All right, sir. I see your booking here. You're the account holder on file." "Correct." "That's right." More typing. "Then it's done. Your companion has been removed, and the travel dates are now reserved for you. You'll receive an updated e-ticket in the next few minutes." One move, one less piece of her trip. Next came the hotel. The number on the itinerary led me to a front desk supervisor. Her voice was warm, the kind of voice you hear from someone who's used to handling luxury clients. "Thank you for calling, mister. How may I assist you today?" "I'm calling to confirm my reservation for later in the year," I said, steady, "and to ensure no other guests are authorized to check in under my name." She hesitated, then asked, "May I ask the reason for the change?" "You can," I replied. "The original guests no longer have my permission to use the booking. This will be a personal trip instead." There was a flicker of surprise in her tone, but no resistance. "Of course, sir. I will update the file immediately. Only you will be able to check in, and I've moved your stay to October as requested. You'll receive confirmation via email." To move. The roof over her vacation. Gone. Then the excursions. I went down the list one by one. The private island day trip. Cancelled, credit applied to my account. The spa package. Transferred to my October booking. The dinner reservation at the high-end restaurant. Cancelled. But not before I left a note in their system. "Mister, we'll be visiting in October. Please arrange the chef's tasting menu." Piece by piece, her fantasy vacation was stripped from her. By the time I closed my laptop, the only thing left of her trip were the memories she thought she was going to make, and even those would never exist. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. It was done. The plan had worked exactly as I'd intended. I wish I could say I felt nothing, that it was pure satisfaction from start to finish. But the truth is, there was a part of me that hurt. I'd just treated my own daughter like a stranger trying to scam me. And in a way, that's exactly what she'd been. Still, I reminded myself of the truth. She'd made the choice. She'd known what she was doing. When she took that money, she'd known it wasn't hers. This wasn't about punishment. It was about correction.
Later that afternoon, I transferred the refunded balance from the excursions and one unused portion of the booking into my savings account. Then I used a small fraction of it, just enough to make a point, to buy myself something I hadn't allowed in years. A leather-bound tool roll. It was the kind I used to admire in catalogs, but never justify buying. My old one was fraying at the seams, the zipper barely working. But I'd always told myself, not now. She might need something more important. This time, I didn't hesitate. When it arrived a few days later, I unwrapped it slowly. The smell of fresh leather filled the room. The tools fit perfectly into the slots. The stitching clean and strong. It wasn't about the tool roll. It was about the message, to myself. I'd spent decades giving her first priority. This was the start of reclaiming some of that for me. In the days leading up to her departure, I said nothing. She sent me casual texts now and then. Nothing about the trip, of course. Probably thought she'd surprise me later with photos from the beach, as if rubbing it in. I didn't respond with anything more than polite, neutral answers. I wasn't going to tip her off. The night before the flight, I laid out the October itinerary on my desk. My name was bold across every page. The flights, the hotel, the spa, all mine. Then I slid the folder back into my bag. Tomorrow, I'd take it with me. Because I wasn't just going to cancel her trip and walk away. I wanted to see the moment it broke. I wanted to witness the shift in her eyes when she realized the free ride was over. The morning of her departure, I dressed plainly. Jeans, jacket, baseball cap. I didn't want her to see me right away. The drive to the airport was quiet. I kept my radio off, letting the hum of the road keep me focused. Inside, the terminal buzzed with the same energy it always did. Rolling suitcases, announcements over the loudspeaker, coffee brewing somewhere nearby. I found a spot near the check-in counter for her airline, far enough to blend into the crowd, close enough to hear. 10 minutes later, I saw her. Her hair was styled, her carry-on bag gleaming, her friend beside her in equally crisp vacation clothes. She looked happy, and then she handed her passport and boarding pass to the airline agent. I watched the exact moment the agent's smile faded. The typing slowed. The quiet conversation began. Her brows knit together. She leaned in. "What do you mean canceled?" The agent's voice was calm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This booking is no longer valid. It was refunded to the account holder." Her head jerked back. "What? No. That's a mistake. It's supposed to be," the agent interrupted gently. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do without a valid ticket." Her friend shifted uncomfortably, glancing around. The people in line behind them were listening now. I stayed in the shadows, watching. She tried again, her voice sharper. "This is ridiculous. My dad." And then I saw it. The moment her voice caught, the way her face stilled, the realization settling in like a shadow. I didn't approach her, not yet. I wanted her to stand there holding the pieces of a trip she'd thought was hers, feeling them crumble in her hands, because that's what she'd done to me. Taken something whole and broken it without asking. When she finally stepped aside, pulling out her phone to call someone, maybe me, I turned away. The fallout would come soon enough. For now, the execution was complete. Airports have a particular kind of chaos. It's not just the sound, though there's plenty of that. Rolling suitcase wheels clacking over tile, the metallic echo of announcements bouncing off high ceilings, luggage zippers tugged open and shut. Voices layered over voices, some hurried, some slow and uncertain. It's the movement, the constant shifting tides of people, hugging goodbye, rushing toward gates, wandering with coffee cups in hand. And there I was, standing in the middle of it, just another face in the current. But my eyes were fixed on one point. She arrived right on time. Her hair was curled perfectly, the kind of effort you make for photos. Sunglasses perched in her hair, a white sundress, light jacket over her arm. She wheeled a sleek new carry-on, her friend by her side with matching luggage. They were laughing as they joined the line for check-in, laughing like the world was theirs. I stayed back, leaning against a pillar, with a clear view of the counter. My baseball cap shadowed my eyes. I didn't want her to see me, not yet. Her turn came. The airline agent, a young man in a crisp uniform, smiled politely, greeting her as he took the passports and boarding passes. He scanned them, tapped at his keyboard. then stopped. The pause was small, barely a breath, but I saw it. I knew that pause. He frowned, typed something else, glanced at the screen, his lips pressed together. "I'm sorry, man," he said, his tone careful, "but it seems this booking is no longer valid." From where I stood, I could see the smile vanish from her face. "What do you mean no longer valid?" she said, with a laugh that was more disbelief than amusement. "I have the confirmation right here." He typed again. "Yes, I see the original booking, but it's been cancelled." The refund was processed back to the account holder. Her eyebrows shot up. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." Her friend stepped closer, looking over her shoulder at the screen, her posture stiffening. The agent stayed polite, but firm. "I'm sorry, without a valid ticket, I can't check you in for this flight." Her voice rose, sharper now. "This is ridiculous. I paid for." She stopped herself mid-sentence. I knew why. Because she hadn't paid for anything. Her friend gave a sideways glance, one that wasn't subtle. I couldn't hear her exact whisper, but I caught enough to read the shape of the words. "Your dad must have pulled the plug." The flush on my daughter's cheeks wasn't just embarrassment. It was the heat of realizing she couldn't spin her way out of this. She tried again. "Is there a manager I can speak to?" The agent nodded politely, gesturing to a woman in a blazer, a few counters down. But the manager's answer was the same. The booking was cancelled. The funds were returned. The account holder, me, had control. By now, the people in line behind her were shifting impatiently. A man with a briefcase checked his watch. A family with 2 kids looked around awkwardly. The whole scene was becoming a small performance, and she was center stage. Her friend leaned in and said something I couldn't hear, but I saw the irritation cross her face. The easy friendship they'd arrived with was already cracking, and then, she turned. Her eyes scanned the crowd. She looked left, right, and then stopped. We locked eyes. It was only a few seconds, but it felt longer. Her mouth opened slightly. Surprise, then anger, then something else I couldn't quite name. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She marched toward me, her suitcase wheels rattling over the tile. Her friend stayed by the counter, pretending to check her phone. When she stopped in front of me, her voice was low but sharp enough to cut. "Why would you do this to me?" I held her gaze. My voice was steady, even. "Why would you steal from me?" Her jaw tightened. "You're my father." "Exactly," I said. "Not your bank." Her hands clenched at her sides. "It was just money." I stepped closer, not raising my voice, but making sure every word landed. "It wasn't just money. It was my time, my work, my respect, and you took it without asking." Her breath quickened. "I needed a break. I deserved." "You deserved to ask," I interrupted. There was a beat of silence. The sounds of the airport filled the space between us. An overhead announcement, the clatter of a suitcase hitting the floor somewhere, the hiss of a coffee machine in the distance. I let the silence sit there a moment longer. Then I said, calm but final, "I didn't take your vacation. I took back my respect." Something in her expression shifted. Not guilt, not yet, but the awareness that she couldn't win this one. A few people nearby had gone quiet, pretending not to listen, but clearly listening. Her friend stood frozen at the counter, avoiding looking our way. She stared at me, her eyes searching for some crack in my resolve. She didn't find one. Finally, she let out a frustrated sound, turned on her heel, and walked back toward the counter. Her friend whispered something. She shook her head. I didn't follow. I didn't call after her. I just stood there, still and steady, as the truth settled in the way a stone sinks in water, slow, inevitable, leaving ripples in its wake. She wouldn't be boarding any plane today, and I wouldn't be apologizing for it. When the gate announcement for her flight echoed overhead, she was still by the counter, phone in hand, probably trying to come up with a plan B. I took one last look. Then I turned and walked toward the exit, the automatic doors sliding open to let in the warm air outside. Behind me, the noise of the terminal faded. Ahead of me, the sound of my own footsteps was all I needed. Some people think justice comes with shouting, with slamming doors, with public scenes, but real justice, the kind that leaves a mark, is quiet, controlled, unshakable. And in that airport, in that moment, she learned exactly where my line was. I didn't look back when I walked out of the terminal. The sliding glass doors opened with a hiss, letting in a rush of warm air mixed with the faint smell of jet fuel from the tarmac. Outside, car engines idled in the pickup lane. Drivers leaned on their horns. Passengers wheeled suitcases toward waiting taxis. I stepped into the sunlight and kept walking. No gloating, no smile, just the steady, quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. Some people think revenge is about that one explosive moment, the confrontation, the victory, the other person's shock. But real revenge, the kind that stays with you, isn't loud, it's measured. And the truth is, this wasn't about winning over my daughter. It was about reclaiming something she'd tried to take without asking. My respect. I drove home without turning on the radio. The steady hum of the tires on the road was enough. In my living room, the afternoon light streamed in through the blinds, striping the floor in golden shadow. I set my bag down, loosened my jacket, and sat at my desk. The folder with the October trip was still there, right where I'd left it. My name printed in bold on every page. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The refund from the cancelled excursions and rebooked dates was sitting in my balance. For a moment, I hovered over the transfer button, thinking about all the places that money could go. Then I sent half straight into my retirement fund, because while she might think $12,000 is just money, I know better. It's security, it's stability, it's a little more breathing room for the years ahead. The rest, I left in savings, not for her, not anymore. Later that evening, I walked into my workshop. The smell of motor oil and sawdust still clung to the air, a scent I'd grown up with, a scent that meant work was getting done. On the far shelf sat an old clock I'd been meaning to fix for years. It had belonged to my father. The wood casing was worn, the glass cracked, and the hands had stopped moving sometime in the late 90s. I brought it to the workbench, running my fingers over the carved edges. Dust clung to my fingertips. One screw at a time, I opened the back and examined the gears. Some were jammed with grime, others rusted. The mechanism had been neglected for too long. Piece by piece, I cleaned it, replaced what was broken, tightened what was loose. When I was done, I wound it carefully, listening for that steady ticking heartbeat of time. It came slowly at first, then stronger. The clock was alive again. I sat there for a while, just listening, because in a way, I knew that was what I was doing for myself, repairing something that had been neglected for too long. Not a clock, me. 3 days passed before I heard from her. The message came in the middle of the afternoon, just as I was pouring myself a cup of coffee. 2 words, no punctuation. I'm sorry, Dad. I stared at the screen for a while. I could have ignored it. I could have written a long reply. But sometimes, the best lesson is in keeping it simple. I typed back, respect is worth more than money. Then I set the phone down. No lecture, no list of grievances, just the truth in a single sentence. That night, I made myself dinner. Not something rushed, not the reheated leftovers I'd been used to during years of double shifts. I cooked a steak, grilled vegetables, and poured a glass of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. I ate at the kitchen table. No TV, no phone in my hand, just me, the quiet, and the knowledge that for the first time in a long while, my priorities were exactly where they should be. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't carrying the weight of her choices on my back. I'd set my boundary, and I'd kept it. Will she change? I don't know. Maybe she'll think about what happened every time she books a trip. Maybe she'll start asking instead of taking, or maybe she won't. But here's what I do know. I can't control who she chooses to be. I can only control who I choose to be, and I choose to be the man who respects himself enough to say no. The clock in my workshop ticks steadily now. I wind it once a week, careful not to let it fall silent again. It's a reminder that time is something you can't get back, but respect you can take back at any moment, if you're willing to stand your ground. Some people will hear this story and say, I was too harsh, that I should have just talked to her, forgiven her. But forgiveness without accountability isn't kindness, it's permission. And I'm done giving permission to be disrespected. When I finally turned in for the night,
The house was still. The moonlight cut silver lines across the floor. I lay down, pulled the blanket up, and closed my eyes. No guilt, no second guessing, just peace. Before I end this story, I want to leave you with something I've learned the hard way. Real family asks, they don't take. Respect isn't about blood, it's about behavior. And the people who truly love you will value your time, your work, and your sacrifices enough to ask before they take anything from you, whether it's your money, your trust, or your peace of mind. I spent decades giving without keeping score. I thought that's what good parents did. I thought love meant sacrifice without limits. But here's the truth. No one tells you. When you give without boundaries, people stop seeing it as generosity. They start seeing it as an obligation. And the moment someone feels entitled to what you've worked for, the respect is already gone. I know some of you listening right now have been in my shoes. Maybe it wasn't a vacation. Maybe it was a loan that was never repaid. Maybe it was someone living under your roof, eating your food, using your electricity, and then making you feel guilty for asking for a little appreciation in return. You tell yourself to let it go. You convince yourself it's not worth the fight. But here's the thing. Every time you let it slide, every time you stay quiet, you teach them it's okay to treat you that way. That's why I made the choice I did. Not to humiliate her, not to get revenge in the childish sense. I did it to draw a line in the sand, to show her, and remind myself, that my time, my money, my respect are mine to give, not hers to take. It wasn't easy. Seeing the shock on her face wasn't fun, but I'd rather see her upset for a day than keep letting her believe my sacrifices have no value. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If your child, or your sibling, or your closest friend took thousands from you without asking, would you forgive them quietly, or would you teach them a lesson they couldn't ignore? What would your line in the sand look like? Because here's the thing, if you don't set that line, someone else will set it for you, and I promise you, their line will always be drawn further into your territory than you think. I hope my story reminds you that protecting your boundaries doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you healthy. It keeps your relationships real. And sometimes, the best way to show someone you love them is to stop letting them hurt you. If you've ever been used, betrayed, or disrespected by someone you trusted, tell your story below, not just for me, but for the thousands of other people reading who think they're the only ones going through it. And if you want more stories like this, real stories about justice, self-respect, and the kind of revenge that comes with dignity, subscribe, like, and share this video, because the next story I tell might be the one you've been waiting to hear.